everyone, and welcome to the show, the Paleo Post Podcast. On this episode, Genevieve and I will be reviewing some of the most important, new, and exciting topics relating to paleoanthropology and the wider world of anthropology in general. Each week, we will be going on air to help teach, educate, and share the science of human origins as it's being done. So get ready, because your weekly Paleo Post is incoming.
Woohoo! Here we are again.
I know.
Yeah,
It's so much. I've really been looking forward to this episode because, as all the listeners listening to this will notice, it's a little
yep,
late.
yep.
Um, and that's made me sad because I missed my paleo post.
I know. It was honestly, it truly is. I know we said this, but it really is so much fun. I love it too, and I'm loving working with you on it. But I think our listeners are going to have to give us a bit of grace sometimes because, next time once I'm in the field, I will still totally do this with you because it wildly. I seem to have access to Wi-Fi pretty much anywhere in the world, but there might be times where you might have to wait an extra day or two just for logistical purposes. But we'll always get there because I mean there's so many stories. Again, today though, we literally have, I was thinking, skulls, tools, and rock art. Oh my. Like the trifecta of paleo awesomeness. We have stories from each.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have some really good stories today, and it's just more evolution, haha, in the world of anthropology, where we
Yep.
see everything changing and evolving.
Yeah.
And we've got some fun stuff to talk about today. So why don't we dive right into it? I think you have a fun story that you're going to start us off with.
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, this is my baby of babies within the field. Of course, is anything to do with rock art, and this story comes out of one of my favorite caves, which is La Pasiaga in northern Spain. So, this is in the Cantabrian region, and so. I just wanted to give a little context on La Pasiega because it's a super important site. So it's in a really neat, it's almost like this weird, almost looks like a loaf of bread or something. It's this weird hill in northern Cantabria, which is called Monte Castillo, and there's 5 known different cave art complexes in that one single mountain. It's not even that big. I mean, I'm from Canada and we have like the Rockies. It's not like that. It is a large hill. You could hike up to it, not that hard. But it's a really neat spot because the mountain was quite distinctive looking. It's looking down over this fantastic big river valley, which literally runs from the Cantabrian Mountains straight out to the coast. So, majorly important, like, migration route during the Paleolithic. Like, all the big herds of animals would have been running up and down that valley, and from this mountain or large hill, you would have had like a really excellent command of the whole landscape. So very strategically placed. La Pasiaga actually has at least 3 different entrances. And so there's all these different sections of La Pasiaga, and it was visited multiple times starting, one of the 3 Neanderthal, like those ones that's supposed to be the Neanderthal or the Scalariform there, the ladder shape.
Right.
That's in one of the chambers. One of the sections of La Pasiaga has that. And then there's also La Pasiaga, I think A and B, which I'm guessing, based on what the story's about, was probably more in there, though there are also animals in the other one too. So I think that's just to provide a bit of context. Is La Pasiaga is quite easy to navigate. Like, you can walk through it pretty easily. It's not super tiny. It's not, I mean, there's places that are narrow, but it's not like a squeezy cave, right? And the art starts quite near the entrances too. So it's definitely, I suspect it was probably repeatedly visited over time, frankly, probably across like 50,000 plus years. So lots and lots of, it's a fascinating cave, whereas like other ones are more like somebody maybe went in once, did some stuff, and nobody ever went back. Like, that was it. So
Right.
busy cave, really fascinating, hundreds of images in it. And so in this particular case, we're talking about animal images, which is okay. I do like the animals too, mostly, just not as much as the science. But what the researchers did in the study is they revisited a lot of, there was what were supposed to be like partial animals in there, and so only like pieces of them were painted or engraved, right? Uh, so whether heads, backlines, feet, like, but there's only bits and pieces of them, right?
Right.
And yeah, and so then what they did though is that previously, I mean, the problem with photography, I mean, the problem with art in general is it's two-dimensional, right? And I mean, I've often had this thought about animals in general, which is how do you depict in 2 dimensions what is actually a three-dimensional creature that you're experiencing with your five senses, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is where, I mean, it's a big, fascinating cognitive leap to decide this is a bison, even though it doesn't smell like a bison. It's not the right size to be a bison. It's not furry like a bison. Like you're stripping off. Yeah,
Right.
it doesn't
Right.
smell. Who knows how? I bet you bison are stinky. But
Right.
so there's a
You
lot
have
of
to.
things missing.
Yeah, you have to have this abstract ability to form these images and pictures in your mind and understand what they are, to
Hmm.
put them on a cave. And then I think what's so amazing about the human mind is
Hmm.
one person could have done that, 10,000 years ago, or obviously
Yep.
longer, and we go in that cave and we recognize what it is.
Yes, that's dude. That's like literally. This is like the neuroscience and the fascinating like cognitive evolution behind this is that ability to recognize these two-dimensional shapes and these out of three-dimensional, original sort of the original subject does not look like that. I mean, it that's actually a really big mental cognitive leap, which we just take so for granted
Right, right.
because in the modern world, we're born into graphic reality, right? It already existed. But yes, so with all these partial animals, the questions were always, well, has the paint just washed off the walls, or did somebody get interrupted in the middle of doing it, or maybe they were only drawing part of the animal because that was all that mattered to them. So here's the really fun thing about this is that they went back and they photographed it using a different technique that created 3D images. So
Hmm.
for the first time, they were actually taking, because I mean, cave walls are very bumpy and craggy, and
Right, right.
these are not flat like a canvas, right? And so they took into account the three dimensionality of the wall itself, and at that point, there were dozens of animals that were actually complete.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
yeah, because
you're
they were.
saying once
Yeah,
you flatten it out and take away like the curvature and everything or the
yep,
bumpiness, you can actually see a full image of an animal versus it going behind a curve or something and you can't see it anymore.
yeah, sort of. Actually, what I mean is that it's more that they. Sorry if I didn't explain that well. I got excited. It made sense in my brain. But yeah, so what it more is that they were using the natural features of the cave
Oh, that's
as the other
right.
parts of it, right?
Okay, I see what you're
So
saying.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
see what
Sorry, no, that's my overly enthusiastic. I'd already jumped ahead. But so, for instance, like they didn't draw the back of the bison because there was a natural rock ledge right there, which perfectly matches the back line of a bison. So the tail's on one end of it, the head's on the other. They're using the rock as part of the actual depiction.
Right. Okay. And so, for example, for a possibly more, well-known cave, a Chauvet, they do that there, don't they? With
Hmm.
the lions and the bisons?
Oh, I think that's the thing is that the question has often been that how how much does the wall impact the subject,
Hmm.
and then also like are we seeing is this one person who did that, also the question of pareidolia. I don't think I pronounced that right. I'm not sure if I've ever said that out loud before. Pareidolia. I mean, it's one of those words that I know exactly what it means. I can define
Yeah.
it for you. Never said it out loud before, so we'll see. I took a run at it. We'll see if it was right or not. If not, I'm sure the listeners will let us know. But it refers to the fact that our brain and our eyes naturally seek
Um,
order and shapes out of
right.
things, right? So we
Right.
look at a cloud, we see a sheep, right? You look at a cave wall, there is that curved line which is what an animal naturally, or that humpy head of a bison, or like it's naturally already looking like that. And then you bring it out of the wall in a way, right? Like in a mixed media sort of format, or like, so I think that's the argument the researchers are making is that maybe we need to start thinking of the cave wall as being part of the art as opposed to just being this like static surface upon which it's made, the cave wall is actually part of the image in a different way. It's just that we weren't maybe seeing it right before.
Right.
But also torchlight, having
Absolutely.
fire in caves. Um, I've been in there with like colleagues and stuff before where they've done the thing where you can sort of shake your flashlight around to sort of give it more of a glimmery look, and it really does change the
Mhm.
way the walls look because the shadowing's different, right?
Right, absolutely. And I mean, not to mention, so of course I've heard the idea that, they use torchlight and that makes, the art
Yeah.
seem to dance and become 3D. But of course, you're also in a cave, which is
Yep.
dark. Your
Yep.
senses are already heightened and you're kind of not in a normal state. Now, if you're in a small enclosed area, it could be filling with smoke, so you might be
Hmm.
inhaling some smoke and you're getting this altered state of mind, I think, when you're looking possibly at these images,
Absolutely, it's
depending on the
totally possible.
situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where people have asked me lots of times about, mushrooms or other like psychedelics, and to this point, we haven't actually found any evidence of them in the form of pollen or anything. But I mean, a cave is literally a sensory deprivation chamber. Like,
Exactly.
what more do you want? You're literally in this weird, dark, quiet space, and then yeah, with the light, with the torches, and again, I mean, things like repetitive drumming, or like there's so
Yeah.
many ways to alter your state.
Absolutely.
And so again, I mean, yeah, that's gonna. There's one cave, Las Chimeneas, which is the next cave over from La Pasiaga, same mountain. There is a protrusion of rock right in the depths of this cave, which looks exactly like a lion's head, like coming out of the rock. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So, again, oh, did they see it too? We don't know. But what's interesting is we're back to biology and the fact that our brains are kind of wired the same way. So if we're able to pick things out of natural features, there is some logic to this. And in a way, this is almost confirming that, yeah, they really were using like depressions in there to be like the stomach line of something, or they were using a rocky edge to be the back line, or there's a hole that was being used as the eye of something. So incorporating it, right?
Absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
just fascinating.
It's so fun. Yeah, and once again shows that the La Pasiega is so well studied too. I mean, I think it was found in like 1908, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's been around, and yet we're still finding new stuff, right? So
Right,
cool.
right. So, I think that is a perfect,
Ha! I know we did it.
perfect time for us.
Unplanned,
I know,
unplanned,
always,
just so everybody
always
knows.
unplanned. But I think that is a great time for us to switch to our next
Yep. Yeah.
topic for today. And what we're
Yes.
talking about is, and I'm just going to state this now because I only found this out when this paper came out. So we're going to be talking about a fossil ape skull that was found in Turkey. It was formerly known as the country of Turkey, but I found out 2 years ago the president decided to, for cultural reasons, to better express themselves, they renamed it slightly, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Turkey, but I'm just
Yeah,
letting
like
everyone
me
know
with
I might not be right.
pareidolia.
Yeah.
You're doing your
So
best. Yes.
exactly. So
Yep.
what we're talking about is there's a lot of pop and pump, whatever that word is, pop and circumstance going on
Yep.
about this find because people are saying, well, here's the proof or here's evidence that hominins really evolved in Europe instead of Africa because they were found in Anatolia. This skull was found in Anatolia in 2015, and we'll get into it in a second on why that's interesting. People are just jumping to the fact that we're going to disregard everything now because of this. But to talk about it, just the fossil a little more.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Tell me about how
yeah,
old is it, and like, yeah, tell me more.
absolutely. So it is a 8.7 million-year-old
Oh, dang.
uh, partial skull and cranium, and
Hmm.
it's extremely well preserved. There's more of the cranium preserved than almost any other ape fossil from that time period,
Wow.
and it was published this week by David Began and Ayla Sevam Evil from Toronto and Akara Universities,
Hmm.
and when they're describing this creature, which the name is not the easiest to pronounce either. The Anad- Anadolvius, I think,
Ooh, okay.
is what the species was dubbed, Anadolvius. And it was the size, they think, of a small female gorilla. So
Oh,
this is
that's
pretty
pretty
big.
big.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
big. This is not, when we're talking about hominins, we're usually talking pretty small creatures compared to other
Yeah.
great apes and other hominids.
Yeah.
Uh, so this creature was actually pretty big, and it was found in what they believe the ecological system would have been what was very close to modern day Africa.
Oh,
So
nice.
they're
Okay.
thinking that 8.7 million years ago there was this ape-like creature
Hmm.
that they believe might have been at the very tip of what the hominin line was that then went into Africa, and then we have the evolution from that point on. Now, so people are saying, well, hominins originated in Europe then, not Africa.
Can
Not
I
so
ask? I have a question for you first.
sure.
Can I ask
Go
two
for it.
questions just to confirm things?
Yeah.
Because you're more up on the bioanth stuff than me. What was the age at which, a best guess as of right now, that we split from gorillas and that we split from chimps?
Gorillas, I believe, is 12 million years ago. I could be wrong.
Okay,
I
that
think
sounds
it's
about right.
12.
I think it was a double-digit number. I thought I
Yeah,
remembered that
yeah.
too.
And
Yeah.
chimps, it is, I think, 7 or 8.
Okay.
I think.
So this is pre-chimp split if it's a direct
Yeah,
ancestor, but it could also just be a relative. It doesn't even have to
exactly.
be
Exactly.
right because that far back we don't have the capacity right now to sequence proteins or genetics or like so we're recognizing that it's part of the ancestral ape family basically
Yes.
and
Yes.
probably post gorilla split but pre chimp split so
Exactly.
which and also uh, I'm trying to think about the geology too about what 8.7 million years ago is long enough ago that the continents were probably slightly different.
Probably. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
not
I mean, we're not like
100,
full
but
blown,
yeah.
but probably a little bit of difference. So, yeah, okay, I'm just sort of mentally thinking about when people are making arguments for Europe versus Africa, like whether those are, do you know what I mean? Like that far back,
Exactly.
does that even count? Is that
Exactly.
a thing?
And that's kind of my point because I mean, if you really want to play semantics and
Yeah,
argue these things, well, a squirrel-like mammal was our ancestor, really. That wasn't God knows where. Are you
right?
going to say that's where hominins came from? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
where
yeah,
do you draw the line? And I think
yeah,
paleoanthropologists really are drawing the line at that, almost that chimp split, and that occurred
yeah,
in Africa, not in
yeah,
Europe. And I
yeah,
think that's really where we're sticking, or at least I and many others are sticking with the idea that no, we did not come from Europe. Yes, an ape-like creature possibly came from Europe, or others came
hmm
from because we know of others like Oreopithecus and a
yeah.
few other apes that were in Europe. Apes used to be in Europe. We know
Isn't
that.
that wild to
It's
think that?
crazy. Europe
Yeah,
used to
it's
be
so
filled
cool.
with apes.
Wasn't there
That
hippos
doesn't.
too? I feel like there was hippos back. Like, isn't
I
that
don't
wild?
know.
Like, there's so
That'd
many
be
crazy
crazy. A
creatures.
hippo in Europe? That'd be
I feel like there was hippos. Something to do with the UK. I can't remember when it was, but
a
yeah,
hippo
like
down the Thames.
wasn't that wild? I think so.
That'd
Like
be
maybe not in the
crazy.
Thames, but yeah. So it's such a different world back then that it's yeah. I mean, do you think though this has more to do with? I mean, we've sort of joked about this before. I mean, paleoanthropology is a blood sport, like
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah.
the sense that I mean, I know stories. I pretty much get along with everybody, but like I know stories of people who've like not spoken in like 40 years because they disagree on like the organization of a tool system. Like like people take their stuff really seriously. So I do.
Absolutely.
I wonder if this goes to me. That's what when you telling me about this story. That was my first thing. Was I was like, oh, this is like that old argument about out of Africa versus what was it, the
Yeah, the
multi-regional.
multi-regional versus out of Africa, yeah.
Yeah, so
It's still
so
going
that
on, by the way, but
oh, I'm sure it is still going on. It hasn't
it's
stopped.
definitely
So
much smaller. It's definitely a minority of people who are multi-regionalists, but
yeah, yeah, and often it's later, but it's just that whole idea of yeah, as you said, does it matter? But also, do you think it has to do with the media just wanting sometimes to be like,
Absolutely.
this new amazing thing has
Well,
like changed
absolutely.
everything, right?
Exactly. Every
Yeah,
time there's something that is new in anthropology, the media likes
yeah.
to spin the story that it's the greatest thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I love all the new discoveries. I mean, this is why
Yeah.
I think it's crazy we're able to come up with 3 really solid stories every week. Like we're not, we're not scraping the barrel. Like these are really great
No,
stories
absolutely
too.
not.
But it is funny. But I guess it's because again, it's human evolution. So it's almost like um, we have skin in the game because this is like our ancestors. Like, does that make sense? So
Yeah,
I think we're more
absolutely.
invested than when if they were like, we found a new species of roundworm and it's the original roundworm, but we're like, oh, that's neat. But like, it doesn't. It's a
Yeah.
more distant thing, right? So no, it's fascinating. That's a cool story, though. So tell me more. Is there anything else you wanted to tell me before we rambled off into philosophical territory?
Not too much. I would
Yeah,
just suggest that listeners definitely want to go look at see what this fossil looks like because it looks really cool.
yeah.
It looks very cool, and but there's not too much else to say about it besides
Okay.
people are trying to change the story again
Yeah,
on this new fossil, which is always what happens. But it
yeah.
is a cool new fossil.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I mean, every fossil, we have so few. How many was it again? We were talking about that. Like
I
there's like
I don't know.
handfuls. Like it's not like there are hundreds. Like it's and most of it's teeth, right? So
Yeah,
this cranium is a wonderful, magnificent find in its own right, just
absolutely.
for having that much to reconstruct with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
comparatively, to find a cranium in this well preserved condition is just
Yeah.
for 8 points. That's older than Tumai. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just insane
Yeah.
that it's this
It's
well
so cool.
preserved.
I love it. That makes me really happy. Like, doesn't it's
Right?
such a neat story? Like, just in general, whether it's the ancestor of all of us or not, it's still incredibly
Right.
cool, and it adds to the story, right? Because I mean, I
Exactly.
think that's really where everything right now is that we're just expanding out. There's new chapters we didn't even know needed to be in the book,
Exactly.
right? And
Perfectly
we're just starting to
described.
find them.
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
I think, you know, you have a
yeah.
story that we will
Speaking of
discuss.
finding things, I know.
Yes,
Look,
this was
look
an
at
interesting
us.
find.
We're like professional segwayers. Is that a term? I feel like it should be. Okay, third and final story this week. Really cool one. It just came out quite recently. And I think it ties in really nicely with sort of everything we're talking about here. So these were 300,000-year-old tools that were found in a site in Kent in the UK. And at this point, we don't know who made them. Neanderthals were floating around the area. There was also a ancestral species, which I'll ask you about in a second, because you're better on the bioant stuff. But in this site, I think they were excavating, they were building a new building or something, and they found this whole site with 800 tools. So, like, that's a big cache of tools.
Yeah.
Um, and then when the cool thing about this was that they found 2 of these hand axes. So those are those teardrop shaped stone tools that were sort of like the Swiss Army knife of the Paleolithic world, useful for many things. Um, and but these 2 were very large, so they would have actually been hard to hold in a hand, and so they're kind of an intriguing thing, which we don't know. We still don't know. We'll get back. We'll put a pin in that piece. And then the other big thing was what they were saying was it's a really interesting insight into the United Kingdom around 300,000 years ago when it was like it was wooded, there was river valleys, you also had the elk, the deer, but then big species, so they had like lions there, and they had the straight tusked elephants,
Mm.
which are huge. So I mean, I think they're 14 feet tall, so that's like more than 2 humans tall. Isn't that wild? They must have been so difficult to hunt. And they weighed like 15 tons. So it's also a pretty good barbecue. Um,
Absolutely.
but I think that, so that's kind of like the who, what, where, when. Well, we don't know the who.
Right, right.
And so I think the big thing that they were flagging in the article was finding such a large cache of tools together in an environment that allowed them to kind of get a sense of what like the space, like what the environment was like at that time. So a chance bit of a window into 300,000 years ago. Um, and then, but the 2 big hand axes is probably the other thing too, which was exciting about this story because we don't know what they do with them. So have you looked at these big hand axes before with any of your stuff?
Yeah, I have. And I've actually seen bigger ones from Africa that
Nice.
the use of them is definitely perplexing.
Yeah.
Some researchers think they could have been used to make other tools. Some
Hmm.
researchers think they were used in butchering, large pieces of meat, where instead of taking the tool to the meat, you take the meat to the tool.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but I don't really know. I've seen
Okay.
them. I don't really know.
Yeah. So for the listeners, if they don't know, so again, and these are what's classified as a Schulian hand axe. Is that probably?
Yeah,
I think these would classify as
yeah.
that. Okay. So a Schulian hand axes were originally associated with Homo erectus, I believe, right? And they appear around what about 1 million years ago at first. I think is the first time, maybe a little older.
A little older, I think, but you're, yeah,
1.2-ish,
around there.
somewhere
Yeah,
around there.
around
Yes, we're generalizing, right? What's 100,000, 200,000 years? But and that there are huge evolutionary jump forward from the tools that were being used before, though, because they're working every single surface on them,
there.
so that they have that lovely, very shaped look to them often, and they're useful. They have two sharp edges, like, and they're these sort of big teardrops that I'm presuming. Do you think they wrapped like some sort of skin around it so you didn't cut your hand or did something with them? Because otherwise it would hurt to hold it, you would think.
So, from one that I have, I
Ooh, of course you have
uh,
one.
a lovely gift from
Yeah.
a John Murray from ASU when I went to visit there, and
What?
he made it
Amazing.
himself. And it's a teardrop. It's about
Yeah.
this big, and I don't have it with me, but the bottom side is flat and not sharp, so you can like hold it
Ah.
here and use it like that.
Ooh, okay. I
Obviously
always
stick it
wondered
like
about
that.
that. I've seen replicas before, but not never having tried.
Yeah, so usually it's a point and then the sharp edges,
Yep.
and this part's flatter and thicker.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
thicker, so it's not sharp.
So it's for gripping more. So
Yeah,
it's like a
or for
gripping
the
tool.
grip on the bottom.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, for listeners then, so the issue with these giant hand axes, which Seth is right, they're in Africa as well. There's these huge ones. Yes, you gave the nice theories, which was that maybe they were used for making other tools. I've also heard that maybe they were almost used as like in the tool school, right? That they were some sort of like practice. You could look at them and be like, oh, right, this is how you make it. So almost as an example of how to make it. But
Yeah.
then there's the fun theory that I totally wanted to talk about, which is that the sexual selection,
I
right?
I know where this is going.
We
Yeah.
have to. We have to talk about it. I started giggling instantly. I was like, oh, we got to go there, right? So yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, there has also been proposed that maybe making masterful hand axes was how male Homo erectus, Heidelbergensis, whoever it is, was how they attracted mates, was with the quality of their tool. And then also we could do super bad jokes about the fact that there are these giant hand axes that aren't really that usable. But so some of my female colleagues and I have joked before about the whole, like, wow, that's a really big hand axe you got there, right? So we get wandered all sorts of territory. Um, but I mean, I don't know how practical that, like, because again, we don't know if it was guys making the tools, right? But it's a very funny theory. And some female colleagues of mine have done a really nice refutal of that theory as well, and sort of said, come on,
Yeah.
people."
Yeah.
But it's so funny. It is, but again, it's like, so why were they making giant tools if they really weren't that usable? Because I think these ones are big enough that it would be hard to hold them in a hand.
Yeah.
So I had an idea though, actually, with these ones. I
What?
don't Do you want to hear my theory? And
I
again,
do.
this is just off the top of my head, but I was thinking about the straight tusked elephants.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if these were somehow useful as some sort of, again, a splitter for bone or skull, or
I can see that. I
right.
can see that.
Yeah, with the point, and then with the back, almost. I don't know if you could strike it with something else, but almost like I'm almost thinking in a way that, because I mean those elephants are enormous, and if you
Right.
wanted the marrow out of the bones, or if you wanted any of the brain, because again those are the really fatty rich areas,
Right, absolutely.
and you'd have to split them open. So I wondered about that, which intrigued me with the concept of whether that they could have actually had some practical purpose. But I think what we'll need is I know they're doing a really detailed analysis of all this stuff, so maybe we'll get a better sense of whether the edges of the tools, like, have they been used?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
that's one of the
that's a good
big things
question.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, like a lot of the ones, am I correct that a lot of them don't show signs of wear, right?
I am not sure, honestly.
Okay, okay, because I've read that before, but I don't know how much is accurate versus how much was, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was thinking about with hand axes, just kind of as a fun way to maybe end this off because it goes back to symbolic stuff, is they don't know who made them, first of
Mhm.
all. So possibly Neanderthals, possibly. Do you know who was there before
The
Neanderthals?
only species that, and I just double checked, that was possibly there before, from
Yep.
500,000 to about right when Neanderthals showed up around 300,000 is Homo heidelbergensis.
Nice. Okay.
And just
So
for reference, because I
yeah.
actually didn't know this, I just looked it up. Britain only became an island 7,000 years ago. Or no, it's
Yes.
7,000 BC, so,
Yep.
9,000
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. No, it was
Um,
part of Doggerland. It was part of
no, well, I
mainland
knew
Europe.
that, but I thought
Yeah.
it was at least a lot longer ago, not,
Yeah, it's so
Neolithic
cool.
times.
Yeah. No, I knew that because of the melting of the ice sheets, and then they got split off. But
Okay.
I guarantee there's a whole bunch of really important sites at the bottom of the English Channel,
Oh yeah. Oh
right?
yeah.
From that era. But yeah, so you could walk back and forth. And so I think one of the things that intrigues me about some of the hand axes from the UK, anyways, going back to the symbolic stuff, is that Boxgrove is a 500,000-year-old site. I'm sure you've run across that if you were looking it up. And some of the hand axes there actually have fossils in them,
I've
and
seen.
they're
Yeah.
right, and like ammonites, like the sort of
Yeah.
spirally ones. And it's I don't know if this is the case in all of them, but in this case, I believe they've been centered in the hand axe.
Huh.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's
Amazing.
an accident or if it's on purpose, but it's a really interesting potential glimmer of like aesthetics,
Mm. That's
right?
really
As opposed to
crazy.
pure utility.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was sort of to me. I'm always interested in those first things where you're like, well, that doesn't make it a better tool. So why might they have been doing it?
Yeah.
Sexual selection aside, right? But yeah, no, it's a fun story. So, and again, just as you said, there's so many things that it's just even like, did we know what was happening in Britain? And that we don't know. We're not even sure who made them. But maybe now with all the cool genetic stuff we can do, they might be able to get something out of the site and tell us
Yeah.
more.
That'd be amazing. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And as with all amazing things, they do
Yes.
have to come to an end, just like
Mhm.
this episode of the podcast. And I had a lot of fun,
Me
and
too.
I hope everyone enjoyed listening. And we will pick up some fun stories over the week, and we
Heck yeah.
will. The next episode should be on Friday, as
Yep.
usual. But we will see you guys next time.
Absolutely. Thanks as always for joining us on the journey.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And please, if you enjoyed, there is a way to leave a rating, and it really does help us because that just makes it easier for more people to find it and learn. And that's what we want.
Woohoo. That's the
So
whole point.
that's the whole point. All right, guys. Until next time, we're out.